What's going on, brothers and sisters? This is Professor Spira here. We're checking out a clip from, I guess it's almost two weekends ago now, the first annual Professor Arnold Eret Day celebration. And this is the music. What you can't see off screen is there's three ladies that are doing this this super hip dance right here, and you know, it'd been. You know, it's one of them things you had to be there to get that dance. If you wanted to see, you know, that little line dance they did, you would had to, you know, you'd had to be there. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I've actually been editing this this whole day of presentations. There's almost 6 hours worth of content that I got from all the speakers that we had. You know, Brother Ehret, Takora, and Danielle Miranda. Renee Henry, myself. We had a juice party. We had the music. So we had a lot of different things that was happening, and that is so what I'm actually going to do, or what I plan to do with that content, is actually release it as a small eCourse. I'm gonna put it up on the Thinkific platform and then release it as a little eCourse. And so that should be, you know, give folks a chance. I'm calling it it's like the video library, the first annual Professor Arnold Eret Day celebration library. And there's a lot of topics covered. It's a very well balanced presentation. I was really pleased with the balance and the different kinds of perspectives that we had. You know, we really hit the same material from all of these different perspectives. So, you know, a lot of you are familiar with my perspective. You might be familiar with Brother Eret's perspective from some of the things on the channel, but to hear Takora, and then to hear Danielle and Renee, you know, and all these different perspectives come together, and then to answer the questions that were out there in the audience, it's you know, it turned out really well. So I'm really happy with that. So within the next, I don't know if I put a date on it. I want to get it out sooner than later, because I already got the videos done. I've been working on those since the end of the Eret Day, and so I'm gonna get that. Basically now it's mostly done. I actually have it up on the thinkific platform already. In fact, let me bring it up so I'll show you what I'm what I'm talking about. So the people that were at the event are going to get automatic access to the videos, and then for to get access to that 6 hours of content is going to be, I haven't decided on exactly how much it'll be, but it'll just be a small fee, just if anything to cover the expenses of putting it together and things like that. But it's definitely it's a serious library. And see, I got it up here. Let's take a look at. So yeah, this is. So it's it's on the same platform as the eCourse, and so it's still coming in here. Master breaker. Let's see. So this is a little piece of Danielle's presentation, and we got Decorah and Decorah. She came out with the deer antlers happening. So that's gonna be a heavy presentation. Then I give y'all the previews, and you got Brother Eret. It came out was Brother Eret had been dry fasting for quite I think for about a month before this presentation. Then he broke the dry fast after the presentation with the fresh juice. You don't have the passion to want to, cause like I was telling somebody, man, I was eating watermelon with salt on it when I was a young kid. Salt on watermelon? So yeah, Brother Eret goes in. We got the fresh juice party. We was juicing. I know I already talked about some of this last week, but that just
going to have a baby soon.
Renee's presentation. So I just I like this platform because it's just organized. It's like all the content's in one place, and you get access. You can go through, like I said, it's over 6 hours of material that's gonna be on there. So that is coming down the pike. And any quick announcements? So basically, next week I think I'm going to take the week off from doing the office hour. I just kind of need a week to just some projects that I need to kind of finish up on and kind of get my head into a different zone next week a little bit. And is it actually because I do the Q&As? It takes a while, most of my day today is just kind of preparing, getting stuff ready for the video. So it takes a little bit longer than originally anticipated to actually prepare for the show. But I prefer to have as high a quality a show as I can personally produce with, the limited resources that I have. And so, but it's really about the information and the content at the end of the day. And so I try to, dig into some of these questions that, some of the questions are things that I've, tried to address things that I haven't addressed much in the past, or maybe questions that I haven't heard a whole lot. And so I have liked doing that, but it does take some time for me to prepare, as I prepare PowerPoint for each one of these and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I think I'll take a break next week and then come back the following week, and we will check in then. And so if you have any questions, you can find a link to question sign up sheet down below on the YouTube. Today I didn't create a Mucus-free life page for this, so we're streaming live on YouTube right now to everybody. And so if you have some questions that you'd like for me to maybe address at the end of the broadcast today, you can put those in the live chat, and I try to go through those and sift out a few of those questions there and do what I can do with that. So let's go on ahead and get into some of these questions today, and let me see here. I don't want to do this. I'm rethinking. I was originally gonna do something different, but let me do it like this. All right, so let's get to it. Here are the questions. So basically, the questions today could really come from two people, and the one is a question that I got submitted through the app that I put a link to, or the form, and another is based on a bunch of questions that I received from someone on Facebook, and so we will I'll cover a few of those things that was I mean, that's actually that was a long discussion, and I'm probably eventually going to, and it's not even really done, but I'm probably going to eventually turn that into a blog post, at least to a certain extent. So here's my disclaimer. You can read that, you can pause it or go back. So here's the first question. What is grape sugar, and why is it stated as undesirable, and how does it relate or not relate to grapes, which are excellent for us? So first of all, I'm not sure where you saw that where Eret says that grape sugar is undesirable. That's not in the Mucusless Diet Healing System book, as far as I know. Now, real quick, I can answer what Eret means by grape sugar, which is actually I addressed that in one of the annotations of the Annotated Mucusless Diet. But first, let's take a look at one of the several instances where Eret brings up grape sugar. And so here in this, what lesson we in? We are in lesson 9. Eret says the cardinal standard substance for human blood is the highest developed form of carbohydrate, chemically called sugar stuff, grape or fruit sugar, as contained more or less in all ripe fruits, and in the next lower state in vegetables. The newer advanced science teaches that even the small amount of protein that is necessary is developed from grape sugar. Vegetable eating animals transform these foods first into grape sugar, and then, as a matter of fact, the body in its entirety. So that is Eret's theory there. Now this isn't, there's another end note that I'll come back to, but here I say that carbohydrates, more commonly referred to as carbohydrates today, are any of a large class of organic compounds consisting of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are produced in green plants by photosynthesis. Sugars, starches, and cellulose are all carbohydrates. For Eret, the highest form of carbohydrate containing foods for humans are flesh, fat-free fruits derived from simple sugars. Or not flesh, I'm sorry, not flesh, or the highest form of carbohydrates of foods from humans are fresh, fat-free fruits derived of simple sugars. Sorry about that, not flesh. So that's the carbohydrate. So that gives us, let me bring this, I like to so this brings us to, this is from, I think, lesson 3, one of the sections down here. So we got, it must also be noted that simple sugars or carbohydrates, particularly fructose, which Eret often refers to as grape or fruit sugar, is instrumental to healing. Simple sugars or monosaccharides should never be confused with complex sugars or complex carbohydrates that come from starch, milk, etc., which are injurious to the body and should be avoided. So this is just my layman's kind of commentary on it. You know, I'm not, I don't ever claim I try to take the discussion of the mucusless diet out of the that kind of scientific context, because I don't claim, in my opinion, Eret didn't claim to be presenting, scientific type of experimentations in the definition of science that we use today. It was a little different back then in terms of what has happened with science. There are, as I mentioned a lot of times with the scientific kind of analysis, or because that's usually that's the easiest criticism that people can throw at Eret's work is, well, it's non-scientific, it's not based on any science. Yet I've rarely come across somebody that really studies the medical journals and stays current with all of the different relevant experimentation, and then not only all of the different experiments that create the modern theories of nutrition and dietetics, medicine, and all these things from a medical standpoint, or from a so-called scientific standpoint, but the cultural and social context that are behind all of these various experiments. Not to mention, if you go back and start to study and look at the historic background of a lot of these different studies, they're very problematic. So now, I'm not trying to get you to just believe me. I encourage you to go read through those old studies, and I give you some leads and some of the different books and things that I do in blogs and that kind of stuff. But if that's a concern of yours, if you're very concerned about about that kind of scientific discussion, then I would encourage you to do that. I would also, let's see, encourage you now. One of my favorite books, just while we're talking about this science thing, Thomas Kuhn's The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and Kuhn is credited with creating the concept of a paradigm shift within, in that context, this paradigm shift that happens within academic communities, but then the term has been used and reappropriated by social scientists and other people in other various fields to refer to any time in a community there's a shift, sort of a major shift of paradigm, a major shift from one, from some, either a dogmatic viewpoint or a particular viewpoint, then all of a sudden there's new evidence that can totally shift the paradigm. And when you study the history of scientific thought and analysis, and especially within the realm of medical science and nutritional science and things like that, you can see there's a number of times where there's been some fairly significant shifts for various reasons, and that really call into question those original, for me at least, they call into question a lot of the original studies. But anyway, I kind of got off on that tangent, but the short answer to this particular question is grape sugar is actually basically fructose. So that is that. Now, like you said, the undesirable, not sure where you saw that. Eret basically says that is that grape sugar or fruit sugar is the most essential thing besides air. That would be the most essential thing for building human blood, according to Eret. So that is that. So here we go. So this is this discussion that we had. Now, for those of you that are friends with me on Facebook, you can. So I got this Pro Spira account, and it's this, which I wish I could just isolate this. I know this is all public, so hopefully no one minds that I'm showing this that's over here. But on this, I got Arjuna, or I can't, Ajana. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But we kind of had a good discussion going. There was some various questions that were raised. So I'm not going to go over all this because like I said, I think I'll have to turn this into some kind of blog post because we went into it. And I'm just kind of doing this to show just to kind of show the discussion. But I copied and pasted some of the highlights and things that I want to address. So the first thing is going to be regarding fats. And so this was the concern of Arjuna discussing the avocado. You've said no animal eats fat. That's factually wrong, even for our closest relatives, the apes, which even though mostly vegan, all eat even pus-forming, fat-containing foods in a form of bugs. Some hunt other mammals, some engage in cannibalism, and even eating their young. With the categorical difference between humans and animals, which Eret seems to suggest before, have been elaborated, one would be a little bit more oriented in how to go from here. But besides the analogy of digestion cooking, and to test it like that, if you believe in the analogy, one is left with yet another claim. And it comes back to the worldview. If no animal eats fat, besides that this is not true, why is there an avocado in the first place? So a couple things with that. So the first piece is looking at the context of Eret. And so this is not a reductivist type of nutritional analysis that we have today in terms of this statement being 100%. So today, the statement, people would come out and say, well, there's fat in everything. Eret kind of did that with protein. So he kind of says, well, there's protein in the vegetable. If we just read that quote, we're basically saying, according to science, there's protein in vegetables, and there's and there's basically there's kind of everything in everything to a certain extent. Or I mean that's not, but just that's not totally true. But there's fat in almost everything. There's some sliver or small amount of protein. And that's a modern day analysis, and to try and put Eret on that type of put him in that type of frame is problematic. I mean, that's not helpful. That's not going to help anybody in terms of, when Eret wrote this, that kind of reductivist, very looking at the world in that kind of nutritional type of mindset wasn't the point. And also, Eret is not. He acknowledges that way of thinking, that more kind of nutritional way of thinking, but he does not agree with it. And so, it's no kind of hardcore dogmatic or religious. People put that on us like, oh, they don't even believe in nutrition and that. And it's like, well, I mean, but I'm not saying that you have to not. I've encouraged you to study. So if you're being honest about it, I'm encouraging, and I'm talking to everybody, because that gets hurled sometimes at me, and I'm like, I mean, if I'm not telling you to believe me, I'm telling you, go read up on Francois Magendie, read up on Mulder, read up on the origin of the vitamin theory, read up on the origin of B12 theory, read the historical accounts of those histories, Atwater and the calorie meter. Check all of that out. And if you like, then look at some of the most current analysis, but then look at all the various arguments in those times when these theories were created. There was also counter arguments to those. So there's a lot of studying that you have to do if you're going to try and take it there in terms of that kind of analysis. But so that's just first off in terms of that. Yeah. I mean, those are kind of like straw man type of, like you can go at Eret like that with modern day kind of stuff. The whole point of Eret was simplification, and so yeah, you can hit him with that kind of thing, but that wasn't the point. Then further, to get into the fat issue, there is contradiction or contradictions regarding certain things in the Mucusless Diet Healing System. One of them is fat. And it raises questions about the degree to which things may have or may not have been altered or changed later by Fred Hirsch. There's an article that I can bring up here, which, you know, I don't want to get too far off into that, but there's an article where I talk about how much the vegetarian lessons have changed. And actually, let me go ahead and bring that up, because that's something that Juna, I recommend you actually reading this article. Actually, let me get in the blog. So there's a number of things that have changed over the years, and so that in itself puts certain things into question. Okay, here's the questions about the Annotated Mucusless Diet's vegetarian lesson. To date, this is the most comprehensive kind of analysis of this kind that I know of, at least in the English language. There might be maybe in Spanish, there might be some folks that have done something like this, but I kind of go through and analyze all the different versions. This is the 1924. These are both 1924, but different editions. And then the 1994 edition. And there's a number of things that changed, particularly in the vegetarian recipe section, that changed significantly between the 1924 and later. So I bring all that up just to say that there's a number of different explanations for certain contradictions, particularly that relate to food, that relate to things like the nuts, which I mentioned a little bit. But one of it could have been changed or altered by Fred Hirsch. The Mucusless Diet Healing System is essentially a compilation of different articles and lessons that were created at different times in history, and there are certain things that might have changed if you're looking at something that was written older. I've noticed that there's certain changes that have happened to that. But getting to the 74. Now these pages, these are the pages of the actual PDF, which is kind of more for me to be able to quickly put it in there. But so here's a part right before I do an end note. And Ajuna, if you haven't, I don't know, I know you said that you kind of got into Eret finding some of my work, but I'm not sure if you read the Annotated Mucusless Diet, because a number of the questions that you ask are actually addressed in the end notes. In the end notes section, it's addressed. It might not be addressed to, it's not, because this isn't a critical type of work. It's not a critical annotated edition. It's more of in terms of trying to break down all the errors and on the critical. It's more of it's a clarifying work to try and clarify some of Eret's points that are often misinterpreted. And of course, the clarification is coming from my perspective. If somebody else did this, they might interpret it differently. So I don't claim to be for this to be the end all be all. How many different annotated Bibles are there? There's not two or one. There's probably hundreds, but there's definitely dozens and dozens in all kinds of different languages and all from all kinds of different backgrounds, because it's an important piece of work. So with Eret, when people deem Eret's work as important, then more people are going to write about it. More people are going to kind of look into it, analyze it, clarify it. I can't do it all, and everybody has different questions or different kinds of things that they want to get out of the text. So my whole point was just trying to get the ball rolling, get things started. But anyway, to the fat thing. So this statement often raises questions about what foods are and are not truly mucus forming. First, the assertion that nuts are mucus free contradicts what is said later in the book when they are identified to be mucus forming. Also, many readers assume that avocados are mucus free because they are technically a fruit, although avocados are not addressed specifically by Eret, as they did not become a prevalent salad item until the 1950s. Eret's discussion about nuts can help us to understand the mucus-forming nature of avocados and other fatty fruits or vegetables. With that said, the Mucusless diet does contradict itself regarding nuts. In lesson 14 on the transition diet, Eret writes, other kinds of grated nuts or nut butter may be served once in a while for this purpose, transition diet, but are too rich in protein and will produce, if continually used, mucus and uric acid. In lesson 22, Destructive Diet of Civilization, he explains, all nuts are too rich in protein and fat and should be eaten only in winter, and then only sparingly. Nuts should be chewed together with some dried sweet fruits or honey, never with juicy fruits, because water and fat do not mix. With the possible exception of nuts, the above represent, represent all of the foods which have that have to be prepared in some manner for eating. In fact, they are tasteless unless specially prepared. The contradiction arises when Eret asserts that, quote, all fruits, raw or cooked, all nuts and green leaf vegetables are mucus-free. To be clear, nuts are mucus-forming. But why was this statement made? There are several explanations for this, but the two main ones are that, one, in comparison with meat, nuts are virtually mucus-free. And two, that Eret's editor, Fred Hirsch, took certain liberties during the assemblage of early editions of the Mucusless diet and may be responsible for the mishap. Some of these changes or contributions can be easily identified, as we will see later in the vegetarian recipes section, whereby the editor, obviously Hirsch, explains why he added the mucus-lean menus, although Eret resisted requests to do so. Ultimately, Eret asserts that fats of any kind, including the ordinary butter, are unnatural and therefore should not be eaten. All fats are acid-forming, even those of vegetable origin are not used by the body. You will like, crave, and use them only as long as you can still see mucus in the magic mirror. And this principle extends to all fatty fruits or vegetables, including avocados, nuts, coconut meat, olives, durian, etc. But we're not saying that they can't ever be used. Elsewhere in the Mucusless diet, Eret says it's okay to eat nuts as long as you combine them with raisins. Why? To help them eliminate better. So oil, something Eret's totally fine with using oil as a condiment on a salad. He's not obsessed with condiments. So when people bring restrictive obsessions to the Mucusless diet, that is something that the reader is imposing on the Mucusless diet and not what Eret is saying. And this is one of the hardest points to get across to people, that just because something is mucus forming doesn't mean that when practicing the Mucusless Diet Healing System that you're gonna be totally mucus free. It's a system. It's not, it's more than mucusless diet. It's Mucusless Diet operative part healing system. And so, although objectively some of these things we're talking about have been deemed to be mucus forming, there are ways to eat it and use them for transitional purposes. I mean, right up there we said that where Eret's talking about using nut butter on toast. Now that would be sacrilegious to people who are interpreting the Mucusless diet in a very, very strict kind of dogmatic fashion. That was never the intention. And so that's a problem of people bringing their stuff onto the Mucusless diet. Now, whoops, come on. Let me see, 147. Let me bring that up here. So the actual part in question here is where Eret says, talking about meats, all are in a decomposing state, producing cadaver poisons, uric acid in the body, and mucus. Fats are the worst. Even butter is unusable for the human body. No animals eat fat. So here we go. No animals eat fat. What does that mean? All I can do is tell you my interpretation. So my interpretation, it's not that no animal doesn't eat anything that contains fat. That if you because almost everything that's edible it has protein or might have a little trace of fat content or something here or there. What I think Eret was referring to here is that there's no animals, if there's, and maybe I'm wrong about this, maybe there's a raccoon or there's some animal that I'm not aware of that would do that. But with something like this, so this is what's this? This is raw. This is mutton fat. So this is just a bunch of fat that I guess people would cook with, or you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if people would cook that up and just eat the fat. But this raw animal fat. Generally, I don't know any animal that if you just had a fat with no meat in it, just the fat, that you're gonna have your tigers and all those animals come and eat it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen that, and I've never seen that if you put something of nothing but just the fat, just all of the fat with no meat in it, and then an animal will come and eat it. Now, like I said, maybe raccoons, or there's some omnivore animals that would do that, because I don't know. But in terms of trying to clarify Eret's point here, I think that's the point he's trying to make. So again, he's not trying to make in my opinion, like a monolithic kind of scientific study, and he's definitely not making the kind of reductivist analysis and study that we would make in the 21st century. That's not the point. It's to say that there's not any, as far as Eret knew, there was no animals that would find just a chunk of fat and eat it without. Now, if it had meat on it, yeah, because it's the meat is with the fat. They'll eat that, but just fat by itself. And so that's what I took from that, and I agree. I don't know, and like I said, maybe if you got somebody has videos of some animals that do eat only fat, that if you put a bowl of just 100% fat out, that they'll eat it. Another thing I did was, and of course, you know, you might not like this experiment. This is not a scientific experiment by any stretch of the imagination. But so what I did, I always talk about this, but I don't ever do it. So I'm gonna do it this time, and we'll see if we can see this. So this is some chewed up. This is like some almonds and cashew. So this is kind of chewed up. Now again, I know some of y'all say, yeah, but digestive, it's different in your body. The digestive juices will take care of it and break it down. Again, remember what we said earlier. If there was no digestive juices and you would eat mucus-forming foods, then you would die within a couple days. There's a reason why people can live for decades and decades, and after decades start to get chronic illnesses that's based on this years of accumulation of the uneliminated, the undigested and uneliminated aspects of mucus-forming foods. And so now it's not the worst thing in the world, but and I didn't put any water or anything in this, but I chewed it up, and you can see there's this don't know what this looks like. This it's got a residue. Just if you break it apart, it's got a residue. If I was to leave this for longer, I mean, I did this about an hour ago. If I was to leave this longer, this would get slimier and slimier, and it's just this residue that's left behind. This is some avocado. Oh, Professor Spira has an avocado in his house. What? So this is quite a bit of residue that's gonna leave behind, more so than the nuts. And if you combine the nuts with the raisins, it neutralizes some of that residue, and that's why Eret recommended that. Now, if you're eating this with a salad, that's gonna help. Is gonna help and eliminate. But ultimately, this is gonna it's gonna create a slimy bit of residue. If you're constipated and you have a whole lot of uneliminated feces in your stomach, then this is gonna sit there. And as it sits there, the longer it sits in your intestines, the nastier and more toxic it's gonna be. So that's one reason why you can eat mucus-forming foods if you're eliminating well. If you combine it in a way that it eliminates well, or you do enemas and it's not backing up in you, then you're less likely to have a whole bunch of toxic acids and all this stuff develop. And that is a way that some people live in that mucus lean world. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, if that's where you're comfortable and that's where you're at. And so for the mucus-free comparison, this is some chewed grapes. Now let's see what kind of residue is left behind with this. Huh. You know what? There's not a whole lot of sticky residue at all. In fact, there's no sticky residue. It's all kind of liquidy, and it moves around. Can I do that with the avocado? Is this residue free? Is this not sticky? Can I kind of just move that around like the fruit? You can do the same thing with salad, with green leaf vegetables. That's the difference between mucus-forming and non-mucus-forming foods. Mucus-forming foods are ones that degrade into kind of a slimy paste or a glue in some instances, where a mucus-free food is going to be something that does not leave behind that kind of waste. It's going to, as Eret say, burn away clean. So you do with that what you will, because again, it's always about the transition diet. So just because something is mucus forming does not mean that we can't eat it. But people are so strict, all they see is this is mucus free, these are mucus forming, and then in their head they think, oh well, I'm gonna be totally mucus free. Or they see Eret say something about humans or biologically fruit eaters, and then they want to be fruitarian. And I know Juna said, you've been doing fruitarian thing and that kind of stuff, and I'll get more to that here in a second. We'll talk about that, because I don't promote that. I promote practicing the Mucusless Diet Healing System. So let's move on. So there's a video that I want to watch here. So let's take a look here. I can show you videos of the carnivorous animals that eat animals. They deal with that feces. They eat some of that raw feces right out of the intestines. As part of them as they're trying to go for the gut. So we don't like that. So that right there should tell us we are not supposed to be eating dead animal flesh. Yet the sense organs of humans are in such a pathological state, embodying pus-like mucus and waste that is throughout the entire system, that we crave things that we have no business ever putting in our body. Yet we crave it. So there is this deception that our body can play on us, deceiving us into thinking that we need foods that are actually poisonous to us. And that is indeed the tragedy of nutrition. So, so that's my, so yes, did those animals, when they were eating the feces and the remaining undigested plant matter from the from the plant eating animal, when it kind of used the plant eating animal as an oven and ate its innards, did it also have some fat? Yes, it ate a little bit of fat that was in there, but that's not the point of Eret's thing at all. I don't think so. So when you use, one of the things I said is how to read Eret, and now in the case, in my opinion, there's a way to read Eret that is where you can be critical and do critical analysis. But I think there's positive critical analysis that helps one practice, that has a praxis to it, that helps one practice the diet on a higher level. And then there is kind of sometimes analysis for analysis sake, or criticism for criticism's sake. And that can, in my opinion, that can be unhelpful. You can do it, and for some people it's fun. But what I've always tried to do in terms of Eret's work is what kind of analysis is actually helpful for the real life practice of the diet. And as much as I enjoy getting into different theories about and we'll talk about immortality or breatharianism, and all that kind of stuff. And years ago I used to get into that a lot more, but because most people a lot of people that I've dealt with in the past have not been trained in the art of philosophical dialogue, and so it becomes a fruitless mission to try and analyze and discuss things on that level, because they haven't been trained in the States. That type of education is very scarce among people that if you went to regular school. They mentioned Plato and Socrates and Aristotle when I was in 6th grade. And they just kind of grazed over it. They basically talked about them like folk figures for 12-year-old. But then it wasn't a part of the curriculum later on. They didn't come back and really have serious discussions about analyzing these philosophers and the way that you construct philosophical discussions, and that, a lot of us didn't get that in school, and so that becomes an issue. And so for me to have those kind of really heavy discussions, I find it problematic when that kind of background, when that kind of background, to be able to talk about those things isn't cultivated, it can get very problematic, because what ends up happening is that's how things get dogmatic and people start wanting to start religions and all this kind of stuff, is because they trying to make it more than what it is or should be, instead of taking the ideas and exploring the ideas and things. We get off into some kind of something else that becomes kind of uncritical and problematic. But anyway, Juno writes, it seems strange why a transition could take a lifetime, as Brother Eret said once, or decades, as you stated several times, except for lack of motivation and prioritization. And that's another problem, that the line is never told clearly where is addiction and what is necessary transition to not release too much toxins at the same time. So as far as, and I agree that is something that is not identified. Now, I might disagree that it's particularly that's a problem. That's one of the things I appreciate about Eret's work. I mean, some of the things I think that I appreciate about Eret's work are things that you know kind of critical of, which is fine. But it's open-ended because you're going to bring your, you know, it's like you got to do some work. It's not all laid out, and that's why people don't like Mucusless Diet. It's not all laid out for you. You have to do the work, and there's a certain level of analysis, and kind of critical thinking that goes into it. But you also don't want to overthink it. You know, you don't want to overthink this. This isn't, you know. So then you continue. Don't get me wrong. I'm German, but discovered Eret through your publishing efforts, and I'm eating mucus-free, except for some coconut oil from time to time for safety reasons, because I, for now, believe I can't be sure about that point. So again, and this is if there's any advice that I have for you, it sounds to me like you're not transitioning. You're trying to go too fast. Now, I don't know how long you've done this. You know, I don't know how long you've been doing this, but the actual practice of the diet, you know, if we get out of all of the analysis and all the head trip stuff, the actual practice, there can be a significant deception where when you try to eat totally mucus-free with very little transition, and maybe and I'm just saying this for other people, maybe you've transitioned, maybe you're 15, 20 years, well, if you find it for me, you haven't been practicing for 15, 20 years, but in terms of, and there's a number of people that make this mistake, and this is what I try to rectify, and that's why I talk about that, and that's why we talk about the length of time that it takes to transition. Now, there's a growing number of case studies where people have done what you're doing in terms of just trying to just be 100% mucusless, and interpret the information in that way. And maybe you know your example is part of the you know, kind of proves your point. Honestly, you know, that's problematic. That Eret didn't really create a specific timeline or a specific, you know, outside of the weekly menus, and then saying that it, you know, take 2 to 3 years to get the old waste out of your intestines, that if you're systematically and gently, slowly doing it, and not trying to kind of overkill things. So just from what you're saying here, I would tell you, man, go back to like lesson 1, you know, lesson, because it's not that it's not possible to be all fruit or to be totally mucus free or something, especially in the early days, but or raw or whatever. But that's not what I promote. And when you really read all of, you know, Mucusless Diet in its totality, and you are able to discern between the idealistic philosophical statements and the actual practical application instructions, there is a difference. Now, in your case, you've been saying that Eret, we have disagreements on things that are fact versus philosophical inquiry, and that's just something that we just had to agree to disagree on some of those points. But as far as the actual practice here, there's nothing wrong with using oil. There's nothing wrong with using avocados. There's nothing wrong with using nuts and raisins. There's nothing wrong with cooked acorn squash. There's actually nothing wrong with little, which you would disagree with maybe, but there's really nothing wrong early on with little cottage cheese. You know, I'm not a fan of the egg-based mayonnaise, but that's there. So yes, there's the tools, but if we're gonna talk about the tools, let's talk about the tools of Eret. So you continue. So I'm not biased against Eret or you, quite the opposite. But I think it's unfortunate that an approach with such potential has so many explanatory holes in it, which leaves the reader only with 2 options of either following blindly or dismiss the approach in parts. So let me. So let me bring in response to that. Let me kind of read something. So this is the introduction to the annotated version of the Mucusless Diet, and it kind of clarifies at least what my mission is, because we all got to work together and bring different things to the table. And so if you see something that's neat and it looks like, you know, you got a lot of analysis, you got some things you want to say, and then we want to bring that into the conversation, which you're doing. But even it would be interesting if you kept even a journal or published a blog or something, you know, or just with your perspectives and lay it out, lay your argument out. I'll lay my arguments out. Other people lay it out, and the community, because at the end of the day, it's when you get into writing, and then what I'm interested in, which is curriculum, pedagogy, approaches to teach. How do people actually learn something? You know, that's you know, different people have different goals. My goal with the analysis and the resources is to break it down in such a way where people are able to, where an average person is able to, you know, not get totally held up on those holes and those points as you mentioned, which I don't deny are there. And so let me read this. The inspiration for this newly edited, updated, and annotated version of Arnold Eret's Mucusless Diet Healing System emerged about 2 years after I'd read the book. I could not stop reading the book over and over again and found it to be a true work of genius. Yet as I began to examine it more deeply, I noticed certain issues that might prevent first-time or contemporary readers from gaining full comprehension. Occasional archaic and hard to understand syntax, content contradictions, and the author's collegial attempts to have dietetic dialogues with his peers, all of whom he was miles ahead of, such as Ragnar Berg, have caused many readers to misunderstand some aspects of his message. Over the years, I have received many of the same questions from Mucusless Diet readers. The purpose of this book is to address some of the most common questions and make editorial updates for 21st century audience. My goal is not to rewrite the Mucusless Diet, but to create a reference document that will facilitate comprehension and understanding for modern audiences. My notes and additions will appear in several ways, including endnotes, italicized and indented sections before or after lessons, and editorial notes inserted into a chapter. Exceptions include the reworking of Ragnar Berg table for clarity, and updates to some of the vegetarian recipes added by editor Fred Hirsch. Thorough explanations precede all such alterations. So I encourage you to, if you don't have a copy of the annotated, maybe you do, and just, you know, I don't, but a lot of those questions, including your question about evolution, are all things that I addressed. I might not have addressed them as, you know, as fully as you might want, based on, you know, what I've seen of your writing, you know, and which I appreciate. You know, I appreciate that analysis, because there's not a lot of people doing that. But when you said that, you know, some of the things that are tripping you up would not trip up the average reader, because there's not. And I just know from my experience in the States, again, we're not really educated to be that, you know, that kind of critical, you know. And I've worked with a lot of people that are a lot of people from Germany, or that are Germans and have had German education, and there is a way more priority in terms of their education. There's way more priority on philosophy, on how to construct logical arguments, you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, the average reader over here doesn't get that. You know, now there's some to do, or, you know, but I mean, just personally for me, I didn't get that until I got into you know, working in graduate school, you know, on masters. I went through all high school, and bachelor, the first part of college, bachelor's degree with no, with really none of that. Maybe a little bit of how to construct an argument, in a thesis statement and stuff in English class, but nothing. I was very, I had to learn a lot on my own when it came to that kind of analysis and stuff, especially prepare for graduate school. Then once I was in graduate school, now you're freely talking about all the various philosophers and that kind of analysis and that kind of stuff. But that is not something that the average reader is really going to have. So the kinds of things that I see that trip most people up with the mucusless diet is part of what you mentioned, which is, but the way I frame it is the dichotomy between practical application, which can, you don't have to believe in anything to experiment with the practical application, versus the theoretical ideas or the philosophical ideas, or even theological, depending on how you read it. But the idea of Eret, kind of putting out fact, I just don't read it like that. I read things, and even with little words and the way that he phrases things, it's theoretical to me, just the way it reads. But you might like what I had to say in the lesson 5 notes. I get into this long discussion of vitality equals power minus obstruction, where I talk about the perpetual motion air gas engine, which is a theory. And so in the world of physics, I attempt to make a few parallels to what I consider to be a theory. There are a lot of theories in science that are still called theories, but people consider them to be fact, or people consider them to be, even though it's considered still a theory. And that's how I regard, Eret's work in terms of vitality equals power minus obstruction. If you're getting in terms of factual, what is a fact and what is, that, because then that opens up a whole other can of worms in terms of philosophically, in terms of are facts. What are facts? What's the definition of a fact? Depending on what field you're in, a fact is different. And in a postmodernist sense, it's a little dangerous to even say that facts exist in laws and things, and so I'm coming at it from a little bit more of that type of perspective in terms, and that's what I meant when I was in the response I did to you, where I was talking about that that it's everybody has a choice to a certain extent to put certain things in their body. It's now the repercussions of what you do or don't put in your body is the effect. But there's nothing that's preventing me from going down the street in terms of this realm. There's nothing that's preventing me from going up the street to Burger King and getting some burger and fries and some chicken nuggets. Now, if I was to do that, I would have to suffer those consequences, because it could I've eaten something like that with no transition. For me, it'd kill me, make me or just make me really sick. But I have the free will to do it. So anyway, so this last this last piece here, and hopefully this discussion is interesting to everybody, because I know I'm kind of hitting things that aren't all on here, because there was a bunch of stuff talked about on that Facebook post, and so I'm kind of, as I think of these things, I'm kind of bringing them up. But so this is the last thing that I will kind of address here. And so Juna says, since Eret makes two claims even if he, to my knowledge, never calls them by name, the one of breatharianism as a natural state, and two, the one of immortality, when there's no obstruction. I could imagine that your answer would be that cleaning out the bloodline is an intergenerational enterprise, where my counter argument was, with all the detox tools we have today, why would it necessarily be? Of course, I don't claim to know any outcome. And those claims are presented by Eret as knowledge, not as logical conclusion, working hypothesis, or spiritual insight. And that's where we would disagree. Now, granted, Eret he's not necessarily using the language that we would be taught today in English class, to where you declare your hypothesis and say, therefore my hypothesis is such and such. He's not that kind of writer. We're talking, early 1900s. That's not it. And I know I addressed this with more in the Facebook response. Maybe I'll take a look at that. There's he said in that one quote I put up there, paradisic primary laws. To me, what paradisic, that immediately puts it into the theoretical realm, because there's no such thing as a paradisic primary law in science. There are scientific laws that so if he was to say, if he would have framed it as a scientific law, that's one thing, but the word paradisic changes the context and puts it in the realm of reading the Bible, reading the book, Genesis 1:29, or reading a theoretical or a philosophical or a theological. So if you wanted to, as we started to talk about Eret within the context of making more prophetic statements, in the way that he executes and uses language without clearly identifying, this is a hypothesis, this is a theory, this is been proven by me. Since he doesn't use that kind of language in terms of stylistically, it sounds more prophetic. It comes across as more prophetic, and a lot of people enjoy that about the writing, because it has, there's kind of a mystique to that. It's an older piece of writing. When you get an older piece of writing, and it kind of has that kind of thing to it. Some people hate that. It's whatever. But so then you continue, where my epistemological problem with Eret is situated. He does not clarify where he's coming from, the nature of its claims, since it can't be knowledge as which it is presented, since neither Eret had nor do we have today seen humans in that pristine state long term, totally rejuvenated like Eret described himself after his long-term fast. And yes, let's call it by name, immortal. Being aware of people like Jericho Sunfire, for example, or Brother Air, was it a month of dry fasting? But that's still an open experiment. So, part of my response in terms of the, there's the immortal, where some people look at Eret's theory of vitality equals power minus destruction, and as you say, or imposing that, or interpreting his words as him saying that okay, on the one hand, the body's an air gas engine. Now, he never says that you can exist without eating. He never specifically says that you can exist without the fruit. He says that it's indefinite. People can fast for an unknown amount of time. We don't know how long. So he leaves that, and that's actually, that's pretty much how you would put that in today's language, in terms of, one way of putting an open question, so that type of open question it just automatically starts to put this more in in a theoretical kind of context. And so now, in terms of so if your problem is where it's coming from, and like I already said in my post, we have to understand the context of Eret. And Eret was baptized as Catholic, and he was a dedicated student of Christianity, of other world religions, theology, as well as philosophy. And he actually, I looked for it. Couldn't find it, but it's somewhere around here. I have an excerpt of a handwritten part of an unpublished handwritten book that Eret was writing about spirituality and about Christianity and theories he had about Jesus and that. And now I've never read it. I don't know much about it other than I got this. It was written in German. And at one point, I think it was very hard because of the way it's written. It was actually really hard for the couple people that I had take a look at it, but to try and help me decode it and translate it, it was kind of challenging. But putting that type of context in there, understanding in the many times, over 25 times, where Eret brings up Genesis 1:29, the Garden of Eden story, or talks about Eden or Edenic. Once you start to talk about paradise and Eden, these are trigger words that contextualize the discussion in terms of you could either look at it as theological, because he is talking about the Bible, and he is a Christian, in terms of from what I could gather of things. So on one hand, there's the theological, or you can look at it as philosophical. But as soon as you start throwing words around like paradisic and Eden and Garden of Eden, you would have to agree, we're taking this conversation out of the realm of a scientific kind of fact, and we're having a different type of discussion. And I think that has to be understood when dealing with Eret's work, where this is a different type of discussion. This is that is more akin to philosophy, more akin to making theological points, and there are open questions. Now, we can't say for sure what was his belief. What did he believe? Did he believe that humans had the potential to, if in a perfect kind of condition, did they have the potential to for the body to not expire? I don't know. I can't necessarily gather that, but I can see how someone could make that type of argument based on his some of his statements. But let me where is that? Okay, let me see if I can find. There was something that I wanted to. There's something I was gonna find here. So like I said, if you want to, for those of you that if you want to go read this whole discussion, go to my Prof Spira Facebook account, and you can go through and check that out. So here was the part, the final response I did, but this was to clarify the quote that you brought up, that you said supports your argument that Eret was speaking in factual terms about immortality. It was, let's see. So Eret says, and I guess this is rational fasting. If according to paradisic primary laws. So paradisic primary laws, that's like according to, it depends on how much gravity you get, or how you treat a book like the Bible. Do you treat the Bible? And so that's another, that becomes an interesting question. Do you treat the Bible as fact? And there's many people that, in the Judeo-Christian kind of world, or the Muslim world or people that deal with the Old Testament that do. And so, but that's a particular belief system that's within a particular context. It's within a religious context. And so for those people, the Bible is, and the things that were said in the Bible are factual. Speaking from not speaking from a religious standpoint, the stories in the Bible can be interpreted as having various kinds of meanings, or telling different kinds of stories, or different kinds of with that may or may not have different kinds of historic elements embedded in it. Then other people would interpret it as all the stories, kind of as if you read, African folklore, there where everything is there's historic elements that are kind of embedded in stories about animals that talk and interact with humans in certain ways, and this kind of stuff. So we get into mythology. And so once you say, according to paradisic primary laws, or these are, in this in my reading, those are laws that are situated within this realm, within a mythological realm. Mythology doesn't necessarily mean that it is not fact, or that it is fact. It exists in its own realm, in its own way of addressing it or studying it, and taking from that information what you will, what is useful. And so that becomes my question. When you read Eret's work in this kind of analysis, what is useful? What kind of analysis? What can we get that's useful? Now, just because something is framed within a philosophical or a theological or a mythological context doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it can't be something that at a different point could be proven to be factual or historically factual or anything like that. Now I love mythology, and I'm a fan of I love the stories and the Joseph Campbell kind of analysis, the hero myth, and just that kind of comprehensive study of the history of mythology and storytelling, and the way in which those stories connect with and may or may not reflect things that have been lost to history. There's a number of different historical, mythological books that talk about giants. The Bible mentions it. Other, books the historical kind of mythological books talk about giants. What's going on there? There's a lot of mythological texts that talk about different types of immortal beings. There's beings that emit so much radiation that you can't face them. So what can be helpful and what can be fun is to take Eret's lens, or Eret's what I consider to be a proposition. This is a proposition that is put here, and examine these and see what would happen if human blood transmuted into, the iron in the blood was able to transmute into something that was more the radioactive, or change in such a way to the point where you radiate so much energy that it would be hard for somebody to look at you, as is in those kind of stories, those mythological kind of stories. That's interesting to me, and those are the kinds of things I used to talk about all the time, and I've stopped talking about them, and I restrict that, especially that kind of discussion publicly, because one, it confuses the heck out of most people. Most people haven't, or a lot of people haven't necessarily, and maybe not, a lot of you guys are educated, but I just find that a lot of people have had problems with being able to frame things and enjoy stuff from that mythological you know, kind of from to study mythology objectively. A lot of people get sucked into it, or if they believe that the mythology is true, then you can't argue with that. At that point, if somebody believes that everything that happened in the Bible is literal, you can't argue with that person. I mean, there's no logical argument that you're gonna make to convince that person otherwise. But said if, according to paradisic primary laws, the lungs and skin could be given nothing but pure air and sun, electricity, and the stomach and bowels nothing but sun food, that is fruit, which are best digested almost without rest, secreting only mucusless, pasteless, and germless cellulose. There seems to be no reason why the tube system of the human body should become defective, weaken, age, and finally break down entirely. Instead of the living energy cells of the fruit, one eats killed food, which biologically is meant for beasts of prey, or food chemically changed by air oxidation or decay, dead boiled and robbed of its energy. Mucus accumulates, especially in the heating channel or the stomach and bowels. It accumulates over time, not immediately, over time, and slowly clogs up the channel and filters glands. The sum total of this defilement causes chronic defects, makes one grow old, and is the main factor in the nature of all disease. And so, let's see, growing old, therefore, is actually a latent disease that is a slow but constantly increasing disturbance in the operation of the motor of life. So basically, Juna's argument is that this framing by Eret suggests, or that Eret is framing immortality as fact. Whereas I'm looking at the words like paradisic and the overall framing, the larger context, the amount of time, the times that Eret is bringing up the Garden of Eden. That, for me, you automatically place it within the realm of philosophy, or kind of philosophy derived from mythology, which is an important way to transfer information and ideas. And again, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it's just totally made up, but it's the way that I think we have to take this information is as a philosophical kind of frame. But that's my opinion. You know, now, as you said, at this point it's about practicing. You know, it's about practicing the system to see where it takes us. And so there's no claims, at least for me, that's on the table. What I've been able to do and what I've been able to help certain people do, I've helped people get over chronic illnesses. You also had to look at the original intent of the Mucusless Diet Healing System. It was a lesson plan to go along with Eret's actual teaching in person. So the book wasn't even meant to stand alone and have everything just dealt with from the book. It was actually designed to be something for, like a handbook for Eret's students in his course. That he had created a Mucusless Diet course, and people were going through it, learning how to be Mucusless Diet practitioners. So we have to understand that context of what Mucusless Diet actually is for, and when you get to that, then it's a little clearer as to why it's structured the way it is, where there's practical instructions that are juxtaposed with things that will make you think outside the box, or things that challenge the standard way of thinking in those times. And it is merged together, and for a lot of modern day readers, that is very problematic to read stuff like that. There are other, Eret's not alone. There are a number of writers in different fields that wrote like that. There's people that are considered scientists, people that were considered philosophers, people that, people in all kinds of different fields, theology, that wrote in this type of style, that would freely associate and bring in ideas fluidly from mythology, from theology, from science, from sociology, and all, even, or what would become sociology. It wasn't necessarily all put together back then. But the one point I made here was, Eret never claims to, he never uses the term breatharian, and he never, and I just wanted to make that clear, just so, because there's too much misinformation out there about Eret. There's too many people that are, putting Eret into these categories that he doesn't belong. And so I would encourage you to, if for nothing else, just for fun, read this read those kind of idealistic perspectives from within the context of I said theology, but I think even mythology, and to me that doesn't degrade it. That doesn't make it any less. If anything, it makes it more potent. It makes it more, because to me, the importance of it is to think about the future, to not to be told what the future is going to be, but to imagine, and as you practice, you realize your vision of you and construct your own vision of the future. Now, I love that about Eret's work. I know that's the criticism a lot of people have, that it's, Eret's work is too open-ended. There's no strict a guideline of where you're supposed to go and what you're supposed to be. But to me, that's an important aspect of Eret's work, because we got people from all kinds, all walks of life, all different reasons for getting into the Mucusless Diet Healing System. If you started to impose these kinds of very strict, like everybody has to become fruitarian by this period of time, or all humans are this, that's just not Eret's work. Although people, every day I see people doing that. I see people trying to put Eret's work into that type of context, as if he's being very aggressive, or aggressively trying to promote a fruit-based type of thing. He's not at all. Read the book, read the transition diet. If anybody that thinks that, then read the transition diet lessons and go back and start from there, because that is so that's where it's at. So anyway, that's kind of my thing about that. And as far as yeah, I think the longest dry fast Brother Eret did was he said it at I think it was 40 something days. He said it at the thing, but again, Brother Eret is practicing Mucusless Diet Healing System, and the fasting that he does is the result of practicing the system for almost 40 years. So that's what he's doing. That's his practice. So when you bring up, based on when you say the different things, or the of today, and that was, what was that? If you maybe that was in the one before. Oh, the detox. Yeah, with all the detox tools we have today. So first, I'm gonna call you on that, because you called me out when I brought up Hilton Hotima, which is the reason I brought him up, was because I thought that the argument that you were trying to make was better suited for a writer like Hilton Hotima, who did talk specifically about breatharianism and fruitarianism and all that and that kind of stuff. And there's a number of people that practice the Mucusless diet that have gotten into his work, and that kind of, and they went in that direction in terms of their thinking. But Eret, my thing about Eret is don't impose what's not there. We're all free to interpret Eret's work, but when you try to make very, kind of very stringent. Like, this is exactly what he meant. I'm leaving it. We leave it open a little bit to say, well, it's, like I said, open to interpretation. So I respect your interpretation, but even the way you were framing your argument was like it is the interpretation, and I'm against that anyway. It is open to, everybody's gonna kind of can have different interpretations based on their background, their experience. What we do in a community of even from an academic kind of sense is, we share our different perspectives and arguments within a forum setting or a community setting, and certain ideas can be influential to the community and others aren't. And so I am a fan of that. I'm a fan of putting these ideas, of working with these ideas and putting them out there, and I appreciate that analysis. But my recommendation to you is to focus a little bit less on the kind of the theories, or what I'm calling theories, which you're calling sort of facts, and focus on a mastery of the system. And that's because I didn't see you anywhere say anything about the system, and the systematic. You brought up other people's tools or modern detox tools, and I disagree with that. That's not gonna, I don't see a way to make the process of the process of transformation, of morphology. I'm not. To me, this is a true transformation that can, when you talk about transition, the reason that and this would be our interpretation of it. So you could based on, I guess, Eret's writing, you could interpret it different, but the reason that we say transition is a lifelong goal is because, let me ask you, what is the highest level? Because I guarantee there's a higher level than that. If you whatever you say, I can name a theoretical higher level that one could try to achieve in terms of a transition. And I'm talking about way beyond breatharianism. And I'm gonna stop talking about it, because then it's gonna get off into that, that space that I said I wasn't gonna go, because it's not it's not time yet. This ain't the era for that. I've learned my lesson. This ain't the era for sort of the freewheeling exploration of all these ideas. I used to do that. I used to think that would be good, but I've found what is important to me and what I see is important for most people to get is the practical application of Mucusless Diet Healing System methodologies. Because if there's going to be any success, we stick to that. And if you say you're going to get mad at me for bringing up another author, then don't bring up these other detox. Because there is no, if there's anything to get from Eret's work, if you want to take any philosophy from Eret, it would be nature's mills grind slow but sure. That doesn't change. I don't care if this is the year 3000 and they've come up with all kinds of great fancy detox technologies and stem cells and all this kind of stuff. Nature's mills grind slow. Now, if there's, I still look at that. It's a philosophical point, but that's more factual than almost anything in the book. In terms of the graduate, and these things are observable, empirical, and so anytime you start to impose ideas of wanting to rush, that in itself, that in itself is coming from kind of a stimulated space, impatience. One of the virtues that I mentioned of the Mucusless Diet Healing System is patience. Because to be successful with this, you have to develop some patience. And I've seen a lot of people be unsuccessful with the mucusless diet, and the number one virtue that they did not practice was patience. They were looking for ways to try to rush the process, as opposed to actually trusting their body and seeing where the body takes them, with using the methodologies that Eret lays out. So I think that was, what's this? Oh, there's I know you was asking about Eret's views on evolution, which he doesn't say much, but he doesn't have to. I mean, he just doesn't agree with that evolution idea. It says this is at the very end. Everyone who travels a little further upwards on the road towards the paradise-like, again, paradise, to me, that's a word that's immediately taken us into the idealistic paradise. It's idealistic philosophical area of thinking. Everyone who travels a little prophetic, if you want. Everyone who travels a little further upward on the road toward the paradise-like, in quotes, conditions of humans will soon sense this truth. Humans were once a higher, superior kind of being, not a species of the monkey family. We are only a shade of the original human caused through our degeneration, but you may yet experience what cannot be described, that this kind of eugenics is the fundamental truth of evolution into heaven on earth. So then I write, this is quite a profound statement by Eret. In the latter chapters, he tends to reveal some of the more metaphysical and spiritual philosophies. Here, Eret rejects the notion of Darwinian evolution, that humans evolved from the ape family, and suggests that the origin of humans comes from a higher plane. Perhaps humans degenerated from a source that had no beginning and no ending. Many followers of Eret also reject the theory of evolution and have adopted a theory of de-evolution, whereby humans are actively eating themselves downward deeper into the animal kingdom. I expand a little bit more on that concept in my book, Spira Speaks, Dialogues and Essays on the Mucusless Diet Healing System. So again, somebody, if you're reading the book like somebody reads a Bible, where everything is infallible fact, then you have some problems with that. But if you can frame and understand Eret's work within the context of metaphysical philosophy, or however, whatever word you want to use for that kind of thing, then you can get, I think, in my opinion, you can get a lot more out of it, because my academic training is that of ethnomusicology, which is like a musical anthropologist, so a cultural specialist. So my area of expertise is actually, in terms of, in academic sense, is analysis of cultural context. And I had a professor that told me that there is no culture without mythology. There's no nation, there's no community, there's nothing, there's no community without some kind of mythology, even a scientific community. And that gets back to the book, the Thomas Kuhn book. There's still mythology that drives the overall paradigm of a particular community. And so, in my opinion, it's important to put it into that context to understand that that this is a coming from, when you were asking, well, where's this coming from? Eret continues bringing up the Bible, bringing up spirituality, and like I said, he's not the only writer that did this, where there is essentially, there's not really a line between the spirituality discussion or and theories, scientific theories. It's all put together, and yeah, it's very, for somebody that 21st century readers that want to see kind of fact-based scientific kind of stuff. Of course, this is not the book for them, or at least you have to learn how to read it so that you don't get hung up on it, in that kind of manner. But so anyway, but this is, for me, that's his. It's a theory. That's his. It's a theory that he asserts, and so he's saying that this is what he believes. But it definitely comes off, more prophetic than as a scientific fact. So yeah. So hopefully, you got, hope some of y'all found this interesting, this conversation interesting, and there's a lot of stuff to get into once you start to get into some of those, heavier kind of discussions. There's quite a lot to actually explore and get into there. So what I'm going to do is take a break here just for a few minutes, and then I will come back, answer some of your questions, and then we'll get out of here. So, but yeah, thank you so much for plugging in. Again, if you're new to the channel, be sure that you subscribe. If you have questions, go down and you can click the question thing down below and enter in your questions. And let's see here. Hold on one second. Okay. All right. Just trying to cue up some of the music here.
Band. Give it up on keyboards.
Right. So I will be back in a moment.
And on the bass, Eddie Brookshire. And of course here on the drums, Brother Air. And I'm Professor Spira. And we're gonna play some more music.
Yay! Yes! No! 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 No!
Oops, you fall.
No, mine.
Why you again.
I'm gonna start like just giggling.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff happening here.
Oh, it just feels so phenomenal.
See, he's shredding it.
I know. I love the bass.
There we go. All right, I'm back. So hopefully you enjoyed a little interlude of the Professor Arnold Ehret Celebration Day band there, and you know, I really liked how that particular song turned out. I'm playing trombone there, and the with a mute that's a Harmon, what's called a Harmon mute, and so let me get, doesn't look like there's too many questions, which is cool, so I'm gonna just kind of say what's up to everybody here in the chat and what's going on, Jared, and those of you that's on here, check out Jared Griffin, check out his YouTube channel. He's on there doing, talking about his transition and his just his journey, his mucusless journey. And it recently come out with another video just talking about the kind of the ups and downs and the pitfalls and the reality of practicing the Mucusless Diet Healing System 21st century. You know, it's not at no point have you heard me say or make the claim that this is such a just an easy path, it's easy, you know, lose weight, feel great, just yeah, like nuh-uh. I mean, you don't see us talk like that at all. This is work. This is hard work, and there can be, you know, collateral damage sometimes on the path that can be tough to handle, and social dynamics and things. You know, it can be you can be very, very tough. But let's see here. Okay, Albin, what's going on? There's a question. Diago is slightly warmed olive oil in a pan to saute onions healthy. Recently tried it and like it, but I wondered if fats like olive oil are unhealthy. So it's not perfect, but it's fine for transitional purposes. So it's not something that you want to do the rest of your life every day of the week. But when you're trying to get off of meat, you're trying to stay relatively mucusless or on the mucus lean side of things, you know, and I think it's fine. And we're not deep frying things, just a little, you know, little bit of olive oil, heated a little bit. What I actually use is grapeseed oil. And so I find that that's even more refined and better for, you know, the heating up doesn't kind of get as concentrated as olive oil, but that's not something, you know, in that stage of the transition, that's not really something to really that I would focus a whole lot, you know, or obsess about too much. It's definitely something, you know, in the long run when you're trying to be real strict or you're on a fast or kind of are going into a fasting period, then yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing a lot of the you know, those kind of dishes in those periods. But if you notice that you have negative symptoms, because that's also, you always want to look to see if are you having negative symptoms and change accordingly. So one person might be fine eating something like that. Somebody else might notice negative symptoms, or if they're having a certain kind of elimination, those kind of, you know, cooked oils might be a little bit more problematic for them. So they would then choose something else for their transition. So we all kind of have these various tools, and we, you know, find and use what we can. But yeah, so as far as unhealthy, I mean, to me, it's, you know, it's transitional tool. Nothing wrong with that. Let's see, Anton, but why should we not want to be totally mucus-free if you can today in industrialized countries the whole year round? Why should that be obsessive? But no human eat. So I mean, to answer that, of course, it's not a question of it's on one hand, you could say it's not a question of having access to certain kinds of fruits and vegetables year round and being totally mucus free. If it's easy for you and maybe you're already doing it. I don't know who you are. You might be 30, 40 years into being totally mucus free, and if you are, then share with us. You know, so anybody that does, and so that's my thing about that. You gotta do that first. So do that, and then share share with the world what you did. Brother Eret practiced the Mucusless diet the way he practiced it from the book. The first 10 years of practicing was almost strictly by the book, and the result of that was he wasn't doing long fast the first 10 or the first 20 years. But once he got to 20 years of serious practice in the Mucusless diet, that's the first year that he did a year on fruit, ate nothing but fruit for a year. It took him 20 years to get to that. So to me, it's strange when people that haven't practiced either the Mucusless diet or aspiring fruitarians or anything in this realm, if they've not done that for at least more than a decade, but really it would be good to, you know, to 20 years, or, you know, unless you've done it like that, then that's, you know, I think it's problematic to even to make that type of assertion, because you don't know yet. It's like and so my recommendation, after seeing a number of people fall off the wagon because they didn't transition, they didn't transform their physiologies slow enough, they didn't transform and evolve their mind and their consciousness properly, and it resulted in them maybe being 100% fruit for long period of time, which I would have told them not to do, and they go from being raw fruitarian or even just raw foods, and they either go to eating raw meat or cooked meat, or they binging on ice cream, you know, just have a huge binge fest after 2, 3, or 4 years of being too aggressive. So my message is that it would make more sense in the long run to, instead of playing games that you don't know, you know, you feel good eating fruit for a month, or you felt good doing it for however long, but you don't know yet. You know what you know, you don't know what's up, and if you can do it, it's prudent to transition and wait until you know you can do it, where it's not a question. So right now you don't know how long you would eat, but might feel good for a month, 2 months. Who knows how long you might feel. Mucus-free fruits, and I'm talking about no nuts and seeds, no avocados and stuff. You want to be totally mucus-free, which again I don't recommend. I recommend practicing the system, which includes short-term fasting. I don't recommend long fast. The longest fast that Eret recommends in the Mucusless Diet book is 5 days. If you experiment and your body tells you to go longer than that, and you start to do longer fast, that's beautiful. But if it doesn't go well, don't blame Eret and his methodologies, because he didn't tell you to fast any longer than 5 days. And he didn't tell you to eat nothing but fruit. He just didn't. And so, and I'm just, every day, you know, I see the stories of people that fell off the wagon of trying to eat nothing but fruit and be raw fruitarians, and it didn't end well. Some of them, they last a little longer than others, but sooner or later, because there's such a lack of transition, it falls apart. And so please spread that message and tell them Professor Spira sent you. You know, like, tell them, because I'm saying. And so if you want to go off and you want to, you know, just skip the trans, I mean, you have free will. You can do what you want to do. And so you can do other systems and other fat. You can do what you want to do. I'm saying, if you're practicing the Mucusless Diet Healing System, practice the system and become a master of those transition diet lessons. Everything else is everything else. You don't get lost in the theories, don't get lost in the mythology. But the practical, to me, most important part of the whole thing is going to be those transitional menus and the nature of the healing system, which is, you know, intermittent fasting, short-term fasting interspersed with Mucusless diet periods and mucus lean periods, you know, and just gradually allowing your body to go. I mean, it's supposed to be therapeutic. This isn't supposed to be like, you know, as Brother Eret would say, the gnashing of the teeth. You know, you're not supposed to be, yeah, you know, like forcing yourself to do something. This is something that your body, you should feel your body open up into something else, you know, into where you feel it like that. This isn't like, you know, I saw a video Brother Eret did a 40-day dry fast. I'm mad. I want to do it. I can do it too. You know, it's like this ego thing is out of control for, you know, for a lot of folks when it comes to that kind of thing. And so it's a situation. So I'm saying that if you're going to practice Mucusless diet, practice the Mucusless Diet Healing System. If you want to be a raw fruitarian with no system, or do whatever it is you want to do, then do that. But do not blame Eret. Don't come back and say, well, Eret said humans should eat nothing but fruit, and I tried it and it didn't work. Hello, Eret even mentioned, I mean, do I have to look that up now? I mean, Eret talks about that. Let me see. Where's it at? Well, I mean, I write it all over the place. I'll find it. But it's, you know, Eret makes it clear that he's not promoting that you are supposed to eat an all fruit diet today. Now he doesn't, and he's idealistically and biologically making the claim. Now he does make it. That is I will say that he makes a factual claim there. That's not mythological, or when he says that the human body is biologically meant for fruit in terms of, or meant for air and fruit. He is saying that as a fact. Yet nowhere is he telling you that you're supposed to do that. If he did, then there would be no section of the book called Transition Diet. It wouldn't be called Healing System. It would be called the Mucusless Diet. That's it. Just it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be practicing anything. You would be just Mucusless Diet, and that's not, and that's not what it is. And wish I could find that real quick. I'm trying to think of. Well, I know where I know someplace I put it, so I'll find it there. So so hopefully that then you say, but no animal, but no human eats fat alone too. So what are you referencing here? Well, Eret's argument is that eating isolated fats, that was the point. No humans, no animals that he knew of eat isolated fat. I mean, that's the point. So humans are in that. Humans are considered an animal within this context. That also doesn't do that. And let's see. What I'll do is actually, I want to read this quote. I can't remember exactly where it is, but let me. So there's an article I wrote called, I think that quote is in here. Well, actually, I mean, what we're talking about now, we'll look at a couple of these because this is all kind of relevant. But this is article, Art of Transition, a response to Dr. Stanley Bass and others. This gets into some of what we're talking about now, and he's an example, one of the many examples of somebody that read Eret's work, saw that Eret said that humans are biologically fruit eaters, and tried to eat nothing but fruit. He didn't try no transition. He didn't talk about he ate no cottage cheese or egg-based mayonnaise, or that he had any of the 100% wheat spaghetti that's one of the recipes in the vegetarian section. He didn't say none of that. He said he did this long period, ate nothing but fruit, felt good at first, then his teeth started falling out. There's 3 sections, big part of the book, huge percentage of the book called Transition Diet. No one told him to eat nothing but fruit so that he would have this elimination and his teeth would fall out. That wasn't in there. Yet he tries to frame Eret and blame Eret for the problems that he was having when he wasn't practicing the system. He was trying to do his own thing, whatever he was doing. And same, and I address that kind of stuff here. How long does a transition take? Intuition versus intellect, and that's sort of a concept that I have where you got to have a balance of intuition and intellect, because some of our intuition is compromised by our addictions and as long as we've been on unnatural foods, and so we have to balance our analysis and the intellectual kind of awareness and things that we can bring to our practice, and then the intuition. And as we get a little cleaner, our intuition starts to get a little bit brighter. but unrealistic perspectives. And this is something that's rife within the fruitarian community, within the raw foods community, is unrealistic expectations, unrealistic perspectives about what's possible. And then, you know, it's one thing when there's people that haven't been exposed to the idea of transition or Eret's work, but there's a lot of people that are, you know, falling off the wagon hard because they are either ignoring the transition. They think and that's all ego. That's ego supreme. Is you think you're better when you say that you think that you don't have to transition. What you're telling me is you think you're better than nature. You think that you're a master of nature. That's our problem in the first place, that we've gotten divorced from nature. You know, so when you're talking about, you get that's straight ego. You know, oh, I don't have to transition. I'm good. You know, I can do this. You get a couple days or weeks or months of fruit, and you think that you got this. And if you're not humble, practicing this Mucusless diet path, something is gonna humble you. Something at some point, something is gonna come along, and you're gonna be humbled. And where is that article that I'm looking for? See, I might have it in here. This is the article I did on Ashton Kutcher and Steve Jobs. This was the first. I got a few articles on Steve Jobs on here, but this happened where, you know, Ashton Kutcher who was portraying Steve Jobs in a movie, tried to do one of Steve Jobs Steve used to do, you know, he read the Mucusless Diet book and he got obsessed with trying to be fruitarian like people we talking about, and he would do these apple fasts. Before the existence of the company Apple, he was doing apple fasts, and he was just really taken and smitten. And if you read his autobiography, or his biography, but it's a quote from him where he acknowledges that he took the Mucusless diet on as an extremist. Like, he identifies himself as an extremist. He's like, that's what I do. I'm an extremist, essentially, to paraphrase what he says in his biography. And like here, so this is out of the Mucusless Diet Healing System book, but he says on fasting when used in connection with the Mucusless diet. As I've stated before, I'm no longer in favor of long fast. In fact, it may be criminal to let a patient fast for 30 or 40 days on water, contracting the avenues of circulation which are continually filled up more and more with mucus and by dangerous old drugs and poisons, and at the same time rotten blood from his old stock, in fact actually starving from necessary vital substances. And then right here where he says, and then if fasting is to be used at all, which suggests it's not have to do it, but if you do it, if fasting is to be used at all, then start at first with the non-breakfast plan, then so just leave out breakfast and have a lunch and supper. Then follow the 24-hour fast or 1 meal a day plan. Then gradually increase up to 3, 4, or 5 day fast. Eating between fast for 1, 2, 3, or 4 days, a mucusless diet combined individually as an elimination adjustment, and at the same time supplying and rebuilding the body continually with and by the best elements contained in and found only in the mucusless foods. Through such an intermittent fast, and etymologically, this might be the first time the term intermittent fast was used. Maybe not. I don't know any instances before this that word, which has become kind of in modern times, there's books that have been written and things, people have kind of changed the way that they look at intermittent fasting, but the original idea of it, as far as I can tell, is coming from Professor Eret. So he says, through such an intermittent fast, The blood is gradually improved, regenerated, can more easily stand the poisons and waste, and is able at the same time to dissolve and eliminate disease deposits from the deepest tissues of the body, deposits that no doctor ever dreamed existed and that no other method of healing has ever discovered or can ever remove. Regarding fruit diet, Eret says, to the average layman, raw food reacts more or less mysteriously as long as it is mixed with your own mucus, as long as it stirs up mucus and its toxemias in the unclean, diseased body and eliminates these poisons. All laymen and experts covering the entire dietetical movement up to the present time are puzzled, confused, ignorant, and still in complete darkness of the fact that in general the average man or woman first becomes worse, sometimes developing boils and all kinds of sores, and then starts what they believe to be a correct or better diet or best diet, living on radical fruit, mucusless or raw foods. You have learned that even the best foods, which have the highest, most vigorous healing properties, can become harmful, even dangerous in the beginning. Now I'm going to skip down. Nothing is more incorrect than the mistaken idea that a decades-old chronic disease can be healed through a very long fast or radically extended strict fruit diet. Nature's mills grind slow but sure. My experience of over 20 years covering, from the most part, the extremely severe cases of all kinds of diseases. That's key. His information is coming from case studies of working with thousands of people over a number of years and collecting all this data. The Mucusless Diet Healing System and its methods are the conclusion of decades of work with thousands of different people. And so that's your, that's where the mechanics of the diet, is coming out of that, and the empirical knowledge from his own personal experiments on himself. And then, like I said, he combines that kind of seamlessly with theological and philosophical and metaphysical kind of theories. Let's see, the reason doctor, let's see, okay, I'm still not, there's one of these articles has the quote that I'm actually looking for, and these, let's see here. Let me look at this one. I'm determined to find this quote. This is in my head. Okay, this is Arnold Ehret and raw foodism. Let's see if it's in here. Well, this gets into kind of what Ehret had to say about raw foodism. So Ehret says they claim that all cooking destroys food values, but it should properly be said wrong cooking destroys healing value qualities or efficiency of foods and can even cause them to become acid forming. The raw food experts hint on the same wrong stress as all others, that the higher food value, the nutritional value, food value, nutrition value. The entire effect or benefit of raw food is rough fiber of uncooked vegetables, which relieves constipation. Let's see, I want to keep going. Raw fruits and, if desired, raw green leaf vegetables form the ideal food of man. This is the Mucusless diet, but the Mucusless diet as a healing system uses raw, rough vegetables for their cleansing qualities, baked ones as food, and baked and stewed fruits as less aggressive dissolver of poisons and mucus to moderate the elimination in severe cases. How many of you are eating baked fruit? I mean, a lot of the raw food is totally, and the same people that fell off the wagon trying to be 100% raw fruitarians or be 100% mucus-free, very few of them went through the period of experimenting with the baked fruit, but Eret literally puts this, I didn't add this, Eret puts this in all caps, and baked and stewed fruits as a less aggressive dissolver of poisons. Now, why would he put that in all caps if it wasn't important and he didn't think he was going to ignore it? to moderate the elimination in severe cases. And so yeah, so I'm still not, still don't see that quote. But anyway, so that's wanted to talk about that. So anyway, so that's what I have to say about that. And artisans of wealth. It's our responsibility to understand our body and how it works. Indeed. And yeah, and this, yeah, it was a good point here. We must do what works for us. We can get caught up in an argument which redirects us from doing our healing, or we can practice and learn. I agree. You know, I mean, we got to put put that part in its proper context, because I love philosophy. I love analyzing ideas and exploring things. I don't necessarily enjoy the kind of criticism where all you're doing is, you're looking for every little logical fallacy or every little problem with it, and then kind of zooming in on those issues. To me, that's, I can do that. If I was to come up with I mean, I could come out with a really critical kind of Mucusless Diet book, which I'm not going to do, but I mean, I could do a criticism of different aspects of the book, and look at every weak argument and destroy it, but that's not going to help me. It's not going to help me become a better, healthier person. And so I like to see that kind of analysis be put to that positive use of ultimately it enriching the practice. Yeah, we live transformation, not talk about it. Okay, yeah. Peace, Maddie Cakes Muhammad, greetings, what's going on? And I know all of you guys probably wrote this a while back. Personally gathered empirical data is logical conclusion, indeed. Let's see, Anton, regarding the detox tools we have today, I meant something like the mentioned psyllium husk pudding with activated charcoal, which reach the small intestines, which the enemas can't reach. Why would that be refused and lumped together with stem cell therapy? Well, now, I mean, you're talking about, like, I just don't endorse those, a lot of those kind of practices. And I don't see, and of the people I know that do them, I'm not seeing them go, transform at any faster rate relatively than somebody that just practices a system and lets their body guide them. And so now Brother Eret is, he's not into any kind of, I mean, he's never used herbs. He's not, except maybe real early on he dabbled with some herbs and stuff, but the only enhancement that he's done to the original Mucusless Diet book before he started getting into fasting that would go over and above what Eret recommended to do was adding lemon juice to the enemas and doing the enemas more frequently. Other than that, I mean, there's nothing else. Now, if you think, if that's your theory and you want to go with that and think that by using and we would call that the additive, it's like the additive principle, using a lot of these different things can really speed up the long-term transformation, then you be the person that do that for 30 years and you bring that to the table. I mean, that's what you or the people that's doing that, you bring that to the table. But until we have the charcoal folks and that kind of thing, practicing for a long time, it's just, if that's attractive, then okay. In the same token, I mean, there's people now. The urine drinking thing is getting popular again. That's, you know, I'm not a fan of that. You know, the only I studied Dr. Morris's herbs and that, you know, and so I have a different approach to using the herbs, and I talk about it and think about it differently. I don't get into it much on these kind of videos. It's more with, you know, if I work with people personally, I'll get into that, and maybe it's someday I'll do a book or something like that, and or talk more about it. But basically, you can't get away from, in my opinion, you just can't get away from the transition. So if you think there's something that can enhance your thing and make it go faster, if you know, if you're in a rush, or my whole focus is to enjoy the process, to enjoy the journey. I mean, that idea of rushing, I mean, I just don't. I'm a, you know, a tortoise in the hare type of thing. You know, Mucusless Diet is a tortoise, you know, and that's the level of philosophy that we need to understand. That it's as simple as nursery rhymes from, you know, when we were kindergartners. You know, the tortoise and the hare, and so you can be the hare, and you can try to, whatever comes down the pike, you can try all of it, and try to see if it helps transform faster. I'm not seeing that transform people's blood that much faster. And, you know, physiologically, you know, there's significant changes that will happen. You know, when you start to get into these levels that you were talking about earlier, when we start talking about, you know, these really kind of higher levels, most of the people that even claim to be on those levels, I'm not seeing the genuine changes that have happened that should be there. And the only one that I can kind of see is Brother Eret, and I've since I spent a lot of time with him, especially in his first couple fasts, I know he was fasting. You know, you guys just have to believe what we're saying, and so until you do it yourself, you know, you don't know. But I know he was, you know, I know what he was doing because I was there, you know, so I saw it. And as we say, I saw it, I was there. And it's kind of an inside joke. But so anyway, I'm just that premise of trying to speed things up and rush, that to me, that misses the point. That misses the whole point of this journey. Because even that you start thinking like that, now now that's presenting problems. So, like I said, but at the same time, Eret did foster a spirit to a certain extent of experimentation, depending on where you place yourself. So, but my thing for the people that experiment on yourselves, you have to take responsibility for your experimentation and not blame Mucusless Diet and Arnold Eret for an experiment that didn't go proper. You know, but that's why we say develop a mastery of the Mucusless Diet Healing System, regardless of whatever else tools you want to deal with. One still has to master. You can't get out of mastering proper transition, the basics, food combining, combining your cooked with your raw items properly, the time of day. All, you know, these are like the basic principles, but these are laid out instructions that you can go and check out, versus, you know, the kind of theoretical things. Let's see, transition safer and more efficient, yes, faster, since we are not yet immortal. Yeah, you know, so like I said, I'm a fan of people that take the information and bring things to the table, do what they can do with it, and then report on it. That's what Brother Eret did. We do not promote long-term fasting. I don't know anybody that just personally that's fasted longer than Brother Eret. There's people that have claimed to, but I don't know them in person and I haven't seen them. But I witnessed Brother Eret do these kind of fasts. The only reason we talk about them at all is not to try to prove something or to encourage other people to take on that kind of fasting, but in order to challenge the suppositions that the body needs certain things. Because if they did, he would be dead. He'd have been dead a long time ago. You know, if you weren't able to have, you know, food or water, or you could, you know, were supposed to have a certain level of protein or whatever, he's proved that wrong. And like I said, I'm in a privileged position because I actually saw it, you know, so and continue to see it because so that's the reason that we even talk about that at all. But what ends up happening is it inspires people to try and do things that's beyond their capacity at the moment, to try to do too long a fast, and that's a problem. And so it's a problem I've just tried to address by talking about it. And me and Brother Eret, we've talked about it. And anytime he talks about his long fast, now he always gives a disclaimer. He's not promoting that. He's not promoting to have people do long fasts. He's just talking about his experience from his experimentations after having been dedicated to the system for so long and really working the system. And then the conclusion of that is what he's doing. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of people fell off the wagon like that. Yep. Let's see. Is it always mandatory to have a salad with steamed veggies? Sometimes I just want to eat the steamed veggies without salad. Well, I mean, for my practice, my personal practice, it was mandatory. I would have to look up. I'd have to. There's a part in the transition diet that I have to look that up, and I'll post it down below if I find it. But there's a part that kind of is the basis for that principle. Now, you know, to me, it's just a good practice. It's a good practice because it helps. Depending on how steamed it is too, you know, it just helps it eliminate better in my experience. But you could experiment with it without. I mean, it's not like it's gonna hurt you or something to, you know, right, to do it once, you know, to experiment with it. And depending on the type of vegetable it is, steamed, you know, it may or may not eliminate okay. And I know there's some people that do a lot of steamed vegetables and they're not having the raw salads and stuff with it. But you know, to me, combining the raw, you know, kind of the basis of the Eret combination salad to combine the raw with the cooked is good. You know, it's just good practice. It helps it eliminate, and that's the name of the game. So whatever it is, it's got to eliminate well. You know, that's kind of the name of the game. Let's see, Brian said cooked vegetables by itself takes longer to move through the body, right? And we say Danny Michael, yeah, what's going on, Danny? Yeah, tortoises live hundreds of years longer than hares. Well, that's a good point. And so I think Ian Bryan said broccoli combined with raw salad eliminates well. So yeah, and those kind of things, you know, they change. You know, a lot of people have different experiences. You know, I think what supersedes a lot of stuff was the quote where Eret says, "Find what eliminates best for you. Find what eliminates best for you. What combinations, what vegetables, what raw vegetables, what cooked vegetables, what cooked fruits, what raw fruits, what eliminates best for you." And that is sort of the guiding principle, in my opinion. So anyway, I want to thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. And like I said, next week I'm going to take a little break. Then I'll be back the following week, and we'll have ourselves another session. But I want to thank I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank thank Juna. Want to make sure I'm still hope I'm saying that right. For your questions, you know, we have a nice little conversation going on Facebook. So I appreciate that, and you know, I'd always appreciate the support. Check down below. You know, if you want a copy, I don't have a link for it, but if you just want a copy of the Annotated Mucusless Diet book or a PDF version like I got here, you can go get a PDF version from the Mucus-free Life store. So just go to mucusfreelife.com and go to the store, and you'll see all the different options of the various books and things that we have in there. And if you don't have the audio book yet and you want to try it out for free, if you sign up for Audible, you can actually get the book for free, and the link for that is down below in the description. So yeah, so it has been fun, and hope you enjoyed this, and until next time, peace, love, and breath.